Welcome to the Company Xceleration podcast. So today we're
Yeah.
diving into why a business needs an operating system, why it's essential for scaling your company, and how our suggested 90-day priorities can get you started on the right path. So I'd like to introduce you Matthew Cox over here. He's the co-founder of Company Xceleration and our lead coach. And I am JD Bach, also co-founder and your host for today. Go ahead and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Matthew?
Well, awesome. Yeah. Well, we're excited. First podcast. I did a solo last week, but this one we're going to count this as episode 1. A little background of myself. Been an entrepreneur most of my life. Well, actually, since I was 17, my first business was a yard care business. I mowed lawns, and I don't know if you're that old, you probably remember Summer School. It was a movie with can't remember who starred in it, but they all got stuck in summer school. Two guys loved horror movies, and then the one guy that goes to the bathroom doesn't come back till they graduate. That was me. I left my senior year, went and started my first business, and then came back at the end of the year to walk with everybody. They're like, "Where you been?" So that was my. Now I grew up with an entrepreneur. My father was a serial entrepreneur as well. And some people think, do you inherit that? Well, yeah, kids watch what they see, right? And so I saw that growing up. He was always doing something. And went to school. I got a degree in business administration and a bachelor's in film. Ended up working in the healthcare industry for many years. Exited, and then now I'm started Company Xceleration with a great group of people that we're just helping in all different areas. That's what we do. So that's
Awesome.
a little about my background.
All right. And as I said, I'm your host for today. And a little bit about my background. I've been an entrepreneur running my own businesses for 20 plus years now. But like Matt, I kind of started young. I think I started doing selling for candy bars and things like that for school fundraisers, and was always the top sales guy. And I think that kind of stoked the fire, so to speak, somehow, because that competitive spirit, I was always so good at it. And it just was like, you know what? This is my thing. And then, yeah, after several years of floundering around working for other people and being, kind of top tier employee, and noticing that I'm spending a lot of time and effort making them rich, and decided to go my own way and start my own thing. And I've been doing that since about 2004.
Wow.
So just to set some expectations, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what to focus on in your first 90 days to establish the foundation for scaling your business effectively. So let's just jump right in. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah,
So
take it off.
let's start with, what is a business operating system and why is it essential for scaling?
You want me to jump in on that? Yeah.
You start.
Well, what is this an operation? So, most companies, when they start, let's start back when the entrepreneur gets an idea, and it's usually they're sitting somewhere, or they're seeing something, because entrepreneurs are kind of a rare breed. Would you agree? They're kind of a different visionary,
Absolutely.
I guess you would say. They're the ones that get the idea and say, I want to have a business, just like you said, JD. You said, "Hey, I'm done working." Because the world has two sides. It's good to have both. You need the entrepreneurs, and you need the working, and you need those that keep everything, the leaders within the organizations.
Yes.
And so, what an operation system does, and I'll break it down. It's a communication system of getting things done. That's how I would break it down. And what that means, when you start as an entrepreneur, if I was to draw some circles, it's usually you wearing all the hats once you start the business, because it's you having the idea. then you got to go talk somebody else to have the idea with you. It's kind of when we started Company Acceleration, we both were going down different paths. We met in it was a graduation that we were doing. We got our honorary degrees together.
Honorary doctorate, yes.
Yeah, that was cool. And that's how we met, but we were both on the same path, two entrepreneurs kind of going kind of parallel, and we decided to merge the paths because it just made sense that we were doing it. And so a lot of times that's how entrepreneuring starts. But when you get into it, as we're finding when we start, and we both have had several businesses, it's a little messy at the beginning. Would you agree, JD?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would kind of add a little component to that. I look at the operating system as the foundational pillars that would hold up that foundation for the business. It's one thing to jump right in and, just start trying to go at it. And step number one, obviously, you got to have something that people want, and you have to be able to get it sold. If there's no money, you don't have a business. But beyond that, once you get to the point where you have cash flow, where do you go? So the operating system, what we're talking about today, are those pillars. What are the components that, as long as you continue to attack each and every single one of those pillars over time and strengthen those, you will support growth?
Yes. And, just to piggyback, one of the main functions of this operating system is to clarify, get the chaos out of it, to clarify the roles and the expectation of everybody in charge. And it usually starts again at a young entrepreneuring company. If you're brand new, if you're listening to this podcast, it might just be you. And it's just figuring out what you're going to do and who you need to bring in. Because most of us, we have to align with what the vision is. We got to create the vision. And it's what you just said a minute ago, JD. Am I solving an issue? Am I bringing something to the marketplace that will help either my clients or something? That's the biggest question. Am I selling houses? Am I flipping homes? Am I doing some sort of service that's going to solve somebody's issue? It's going to give them a solution to what they want. And then what ends up happening when you're developing a company, next thing you know, there's one, there's two, there's three, and that complexity of communication in your organization gets even more complex, right? So now you need accountability, because when it was just you, you could do everything because you wore all the hats, right?
That's a great segue into kind of like, the next question is, what are the challenges that businesses face when scaling, without a system in place?
Yeah, this one's a good one. I like this one. What are the challenges? No clarity of roles. We'll just go backwards. No accountability. Communications all over the place if they don't have a scaling system in place or an operating system. They'll face like frustration, burnout. It becomes huge. Burnout because, well, JD, I thought you were doing it. No, I thought I was doing it. No, I thought you were. And so the meetings in that nurturing of the new business, if you have 5-10 people, it becomes really frustrating because nobody knows what they're doing. And what I mean by what they don't know is who's doing it and who's accountable for it.
Especially when, it is commonplace in the beginning when you're really getting going. Everybody is wearing multiple hats.
Correct.
But who's wearing what hat? Right?
Oh, yeah.
And as far as like the lack of clarity in the roles and things like that. So how does the operating system create that clarity and alignment within the team? Oh, you're on mute.
I think you hear me now?
Go. You're back. Yeah.
Bump my mic. I think that's a great question, because I think it's really, to simplify it, it's like this. If I get that operating system in place, people have a flow chart. They'll say, okay, there's a CEO, there's a COO, and then so people get into these titles. And titles are just titles if you don't have clarity of role that goes along with them. So by putting an operation system in place, it's like, okay, what does the CEO do? Well, most of us know a job of a CEO is to create huge relationships, big ideas, and usually the CEO is the visionary at the beginning, and they'll have 20 ideas, but only 3 are good. And so
Or
it's yeah,
less.
relax. Yeah, I've been in that seat, and you got to be okay with that. Then they're also keepers of the culture. So if they know the 4 to 5 things that they're supposed to be obsessing on every day, that's huge clarity. Because then I don't do what's called because when you first start, like you just said a minute ago, you wear all the hats, right?
Mm,
And so you wear all these hats, and then all of a sudden you have people to pass the hats off, but you're having a hard time giving up that role. And some people do it really quick and some don't. And we call it in the world of scaling is letting go of the vine. So if I hire you to take on some of that duty, I better let it go, right? And so then
right.
that way I can move on and do what I need to. So that's what an operation system clarifies. It just really clarifies the roles and the expectation of every seat in the organization.
I'd like to
Yeah, go ahead.
refine that a little bit and by just clarify that that's just one pillar
That's
of
one.
the full operating system. There's
Yeah.
obviously multiple pillars. But as you say, that's paramount to really take the time to go through the org chart in the beginning and even in, think about going towards the future of the business of where you want to
Mhm.
go and define the roles that will be needed within that. Because as you start, people are wearing multiple hats. But as soon as you start really kind of like growing a bit, cash flows coming in, by having that predefined org chart, you can start immediately going, okay, this is a component that needs to be, outsourced or, delegated and bring on somebody.
And think about it too. When you're first starting out as an organization, your resources are limited, and so you have to be very selective on who you bring on and who you hire. And then you got to really watch the culture at the beginning because culture can go sideways very quickly if there's not clarity of roles. And I think it was Simon. I always forget his last name. Simon Sinek. He talked about where the bell curve. He says, there's a lot of individuals that are starters. They're like, "Hey, boss, what can I do? What can I do? How can I help?" And then there's ones that are like, "Well, I'm not going to do it. I'll wait for somebody else to get doing it." And that
Mm,
34% of your workforce is going to be very negative. They're wanting you to fail because they're like, well, it's no fair that JD's the owner, and well, JD started the company, he's taking the risk. So you get a lot of that kind of culture within the startup, and you got to be very careful and keep a pulse on it. So like what JD's saying is making sure that that's just one piece of this whole scale. This whole thing we're talking about, it has a lot of things in it, but it's very simplistic. I think it's very simple. Once you see
mm.
it, you're like, why didn't I think of that? Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty good. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it goes along with our next phase here, and I'll give an example of this, how to align with your team. I'd say my example would be when I first started my company. It was very small. There was just me and my wife. We started in our actually her apartment, and then we had a satellite office that we go to, and then we would do everything there, and then we started scaling. Then we added one more person. There was another secretary. Then we got an office, and then we got another person, and so about 3 years we outgrew one office. Then we had to go to another office. And what I found, we never really sat down at the beginning and have had our clarity conversations. We were just like, okay, well, I think you're doing that. Well, I assume you're doing that. We never had formal meetings either. We just kind of attacked every day when it came. And have you seen that with some clients, JD? They just kind of go with the day and see what comes, and
Right.
hopefully it works out, right?
There's no clear definition of where they're going.
Yeah. I had a client. And I'll just throw this in, and it's a great just conversation. So part of also when you say, how does this operating system clarify the alignment within the team? When I pitched the client, I says, hey, this is how we do our meetings. This is what we're going to be doing in this phase. They said, well, we don't have meetings weekly. We just
That blows
kind
my
of,
mind. Yeah.
yeah, you remember this one? And they said, well, we just kind of go to the CEO or the director, and we'll have like drive-by conversations, or we'll go into his office and just talk. And I'm like, well, how do you guys keep everything aligned? Like, you got at least pulse 90 minutes a week and discuss matrix and metrics and this and that, because what's not majored doesn't get done, because
Yep.
then, yeah. And then in the same breath, they said, we're having a lot of issues with mid-level management just doing things. And there's a saying in what we do, JD, in ours, so you go, they go. So if you're setting the example that meetings are not that important and structure is not that important, so why would they want to be structured, right?
That brings up a really good point. You'll also find that if you want to attract top talent and keep them, you need to create that structure.
Yes.
If you have no structure in your business, and you as the leader don't show that you have your stuff together and have it organized, especially with the meetings and things, that they're valuable meetings that move the business forward, you're going to turn off A players. They're gone.
Yes.
Right. So moving on into the next question, right? Like, what are the key components of a powerful system, and how do they support scaling? We briefly went over, we're going to say people, right? As far as defining clear roles and things like that. But some other things that I want to bring up are the sales and marketing, the meetings, structured meetings, your finance and your data, the overall processes, the technology that you use to manage your business. And here's a good one: team health and morale.
Yeah.
And then your overall plan, your mission, your values, your 10-year plan that allows you to work backwards.
Yeah, this is the 8 conversations we have within every organization we go into. Every leadership that we deal with at the C-suite, and we always start with the C-suite level, because if we can get them dialed in, then when we go down to the mid on those 8 conversations you just mentioned, then people are bought in. What is the vision? How are we selling it? What are our processes and our processes? What is our plan? Our 3-year, 1-year, down to our quarterly. Because if we're not clearly communicating the plan, then it's hard to get people to buy in, right? And so that's first and number one. And then as we come into documentation, how do you do your processes? So we go through these 8 conversations as coaches. And I loved what you said. It always ends on my favorite. There are 8, technology, data, all those things. But my favorite is team health. Every time I run a meeting, team health is so important. At the end or at the start of the meetings, teaching at that C-suite. And it always is interesting, JD, when I work with high executives, Fortune 500 companies, they don't realize how important team health is. They just kind of expect, well, you work for me, therefore you better do what I tell you.
Right.
And
I'm paying you to do the job.
Yeah. And I do this process, and there's a few processes. We have a lot when we come in as coaches. As coaches, we get together every quarter as well, but I'm teaching the company in these 8 conversations, these crucial conversations, to pulse. So they're pulsing 90 minutes every week. They're pulsing every quarter. They're coming up for air. Go ahead.
Explain a pulse.
So we call it meeting pulse. And so, like we shared just a minute ago, the company that didn't think meetings were, hey, we just do it on the fly. And so when I first come in the first day one, when I sit down with the company, I says, hey, this is how it's going to be. We're going to spend 8 hours with your leaders. And that's the first thing we teach them, is how to run an effective meeting. And you'll think this, like JD, and I've been in companies where they've been running for 10, 20, 30 years, and they still don't know how to run an effective meeting. And
Right.
then once I go through the meeting that we have designed as a coaching organization, this is meetings that tons of people run. We have hundreds of companies running these weekly meetings, and they're structured in a way that buys in and gets down to solving. And I remember executives going, "Man, I wish we would have done this a long time ago." And personally, the reason I jumped in and started doing this years ago is because I ran my companies on this, and
Right.
it was a game changer. Because now we had a doesn't mean you got to be perfect, but it was. So here's the pulse. I knew every week my team was going to pulse for 90 minutes.
Right.
And I don't care how big your organization is. Mine was huge. And as long as I can have 90 minutes with the executive team, they're checking in. And the way it's designed, it's very fluent. So I know in 90 minutes, we're going to spend 60 of those minutes solving issues and getting things done.
Right. I'd like to
Not,
draw
yeah,
attention to the word choice, pulse.
yes, pulse. You're
That
keeping
is
the
the
circles.
lifeblood of the business.
Yeah,
It happens at a regular time interval. You
every
can
week.
count on it.
Yeah, you have
So
to. So we call it keeping the circles connected, right? Keeping the circles connected. I did that in my mic, so I'll do it over here. Keeping the circles connected, because if I don't come up for air, and these meetings are strategic in nature, so we teach you as a C-suite group, and this is where a lot of the C-suite don't get this. It's a strategic meeting, 90 minutes, that you're going to come up 30,000 feet above the air and work on the business, not in it.
mm,
And this is a hard concept, and a lot of people, they're like, well, hey, Matt, JD, I got to have a meeting. And I remember one leader I had that I worked for, the meeting became about that CEO and the drama that was around him every week. It was really annoying when I worked for that
yeah,
company. And I remember sitting there, and when you walk out of those meetings, you're like, what did we talk about? What did we do? And if you can't walk out of a meeting and you have a to do, and a to do, here's another term, to do means to get stuff done for 7 days. If you can't take a swing at it in 7 days, that's not a to do for 7 days. That's a little longer goal, and we'll talk about those later. But that's the meeting pulse. The meeting pulse is, you have your weekly, you need to pulse quarterly, and these are 90 minutes weekly, 8 hours off site somewhere quarterly, and you got to do those and
so
come up for air.
so to emphasize that, as far as our suggestion for like the next 90 days, if you really want to start implementing an operating system into your business, I mean, step one would be establish this meeting cadence, the pulsing, as
Yes,
Matt calls it, right? Learn how to run effective structured meetings to keep the teams aligned and accountable.
that's it. Yeah, if you don't,
So
go ahead.
yeah, why don't you talk a little bit more, about the org chart that we spoke about a minute ago? That's another
Yes.
key component.
Yeah, we talked about the org chart. We kind of dived into it. So, along with the meeting charts on day one, we then go back through the structure, because we have a saying, structure first before you put somebody in a seat, right? So
Mm,
you have to understand structure, because structure is everything, and every business kind of struggles with it at the beginning, because you're trying to say, okay, who plays what role, especially in an entrepreneuring driven business. So entrepreneurs are the worst at structure, and the reason is because there's a million squirrels or many million shiny things that we can chase. but
mhm.
but what happens in business, and Brian Tracy said this once, is sometimes you start out a business and you intend to go this path and it ends up over here, and it's just kind of because the market takes you where you need to go. And then once you figure that path out, you really dialed in. And here's where the
Right,
flow chart comes in. So once you do that, now I know as a CEO, what does that mean? So structure is, you can have a operator, but there's still that term that some places use. There's that person that has started, the founder. The founder is the one that had the vision, and they need to be in a box because founders sometimes are not CEO worthy. And this is not, and I'm one of those kind of founders. I'm not a CEO. Like I'm a kind of founder that I'll go do big visions, big relationships. I'll know where the company's going 5 years out, but I'm not a day-to-day CEO kind of type because you got to understand. So this is the flow chart, but along with structure, here's the difference. This is the game changer. We define the seat. So if I'm the founder, let's say that's the seat that I sit in, I'm going to have 5 or 4 things, like I mentioned prior, that I'm going to obsess on. Why do we do that? Well, JD, 80 to 90% of people don't read their job descriptions, right? You give them a job description. Here you go, JD. And you're like, oh, thanks. What's my pay? And that's all they're worried about is how much I get paid. And then they fumble on what their duty is. So, and I hope you're hearing this. If you're running a business, if this is all you remember, this will be a game changer. So if I structure the business, and I'll just draw it out here real quick. If I structure the business and I have the founder and the CEO, so the founder and the CEO, so I have, as you can see on my paper there, I have the 2 boxes, founder and CEO. And if I spend the time with those 2 crucial positions and come up with, okay, founder, what do you do? And you say, okay, big relationships, big connections, forward thinking, market trends. And that's all I do as a founder, right? And I stay in my lane and I don't go down to the CEO that's operations, P&Ls, day to day. And I don't come in what we call go around everybody and do his job. That's where the clarity and the roles come in. So I stay in my seat, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I
stay
think
there.
I'd like to tie this together, as far as the meetings, right, that we talked about in those 90-minute pulsing
Right.
meetings every single week. Why that's important, because as you go through and you solve problems, you create tasks and you delegate them, it's you need to be very clear of who is accountable for that task,
Correct.
where the buck stops with this person. So if they show up to the next meeting and they have nothing to show for it, we know who is responsible for that. Crucial.
And that's the key right there. You hit it on the head, is that if I know as a founder I'm in the meeting and I don't own it, I don't go get involved in it. But when I come back to that 90-minute meeting, if I choose to sit in that, because sometimes founders are not on the C-suite 90-minute, and I would encourage that, JD. I would encourage, if you have a founder, they shouldn't be in that weekly 90-minute with the C-suite, because sometimes they get in their own way. Founders, and I hope you founders, or you visionaries that started your company, you hear me, because sometimes it's better that you just meet with that CEO or that person that you're having implement your vision. We call that a CEO, but that could be the person that takes it down, your vision down to the ground of the rest of your organization, right? So it's good to have a one-off meeting just with you guys once a month. Why would you do that? Is what JD just said, clarity. Because where are founders and visionaries heads, JD? Are they in the cloud?
Many times, yeah.
Yeah, most of the time, 100% of the time. And so if I'm a CEO trying to get the company to move that vision, and the founder comes in and says, I have another idea. And what happens to when I turn my head as a founder, what happens to the whole organization? It turns its head too. And then you create chaos again, right? Because we're going from chaos to clarity. And Dave Ramsey says sometimes you get in your own way. So this is where the flow chart really dials in accountability. And that's what you had on one of the questions. This is where accountability comes in.
Right. Well, I mean, it goes back to the shiny object syndrome.
Yep.
It's kind of like in the DNA of an entrepreneur. It's not necessarily the greatest quality, but it's just
It's
always
needed.
like seems to be a component, right? So those founders, the ones that take that risk to start a business, it's just baked into their DNA. And so, as Matt says, I think it is kind of important sometimes to be able to have a way to step away from that so that the rest of the team, especially once you start getting in processes and things like this, you know, it becomes like the effort of trying to like turn the Titanic on a dime. You do want to stay agile to a point, but it's difficult to turn quickly. So taking a step back sometimes is very valuable. We'll
Yeah.
say that. But this leads into kind of the next component, right? Like
Mhm.
the founder and defining the vision and the values, another important component within that first 90 days of implementing the operating system. Let's talk about the vision and values.
Yeah, this is fun. When you're coming in the first 90 days, we'll bring you on. There's a lot of scaling. So day 30 or day one, we bring on the structure, the meetings. Then we come back day 30. We're really dialing in the structure again, but then we start working on your plan, which brings in the values. And I love this because this is where we teach in our system in scaling is you have to be a value-based company. And what that means is you have to hire, promote, fire, do everything by your values. And it's
Mhm.
interesting to spend a little time on this, JD, is a lot of times when I will coach and we've been in coaching and we've both have seen it, a lot of organizations don't even know what their company values are. And this is
Mm.
at a C-suite level. I'll say, before I let them pull it out, I'll say, "Hey, tell me the company values in this session we do." Because we'll come on in our first 90, we bring you on. It's our onboarding in our system that we have. And it's fun in that day 60 or day 30, because we work on it both of those days when we come, those 8-hour days and work with you. It's interesting. It's been very rare that I've had one or two companies actually can tell me their values. Because what
Right.
ends up 80% of the time, what ends up happening, we've all worked for those organizations like hospitals or places. They have the values, but where do they place them? They're in a frame on the wall.
And
And
then to never be looked at again.
yeah, and I'll be honest, I remember working for a pretty big hospital. In orientation, they mentioned them, and then I never heard them again.
Right.
And yeah, this is
Well,
one thing I
let's
go ahead.
so I was just like, let's like get to the crux of the value of creating that visions
Mhm.
and values because I look at it as kind of the anchor of the entire business. You know, it permeates and affects so many different components, especially when we go into like we were talking about the
Yeah,
org chart and clearly defining the roles and stuff. You hire and fire
by
people
these.
by
Yes.
the visions and values because that affects company morale,
Yeah.
like the team health, like how clearly they're able to communicate to each other, how openly they can communicate with to other team members. Well, you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, and this is so important if what you're saying, and I hope people are listening to this, is take a break and really just write this down because these values that JD is saying, it takes a little bit when we first come in as coaches and as we're helping you scale, it takes a company a little while to get that value conversation all the way down into the company because you have to change the culture. Because what JD's saying on vision, it starts with vision because I have to sell the vision as the visionary, the founder. Here's the vision. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. Because as a visionary, I can see it 3 years from now. Now, it doesn't mean everybody around me can. They're just saying, okay, do I believe this? Am I going to put all my stake into this? And then it goes on to values, because then values, if I say my vision is this, I want to sell 100,000 widgets or become a $5 million company in 18 months, I have to have a vision that gets me there.
Mm,
And then I have to get somebody to buy onto that vision because I can't do it all by myself
yeah.
unless I'm like selling some sort of big, huge mansions and I'm a solo realtor. And that's very rare if you can get into that market. But what happens a lot is here's how the values work is they become the disciplinary and the reward system within the organization.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's this simple. Once you get it embedded, and you're not just, and I really don't do an internal campaign on your values. Don't wear a t-shirt. You got to live the values. You got to talk the values. You got to preach the values. And here's how it is. If somebody
Preach
doesn't
it.
come in, yeah.
Yep.
And if JD's late to work or he's having some issues, if I'm his direct supervisor, I'm going to pull him aside and we're going to have a value conversation. And so it'll look something like this. He'll say, JD, I notice, I'm seeing that you're struggling. What's going on? One of our values is to be on time and show professionalism. So I'm going to take that value and show it right there. And he's going to go, yeah, I was at home and this is what's going on in my home. And then as a supervisor, I get to decide maybe our other value is to help first. And so then I'm going to say, okay, I hear you. You need to come to me so I know what's going on so I can help you. Because
Yeah.
your performance is starting to reflect and I want to be there to help you. And so now we're having a value conversation as coworkers because team health is important. So maybe JD's just struggling at home, but now that we're having that conversation, what can I do to help you? Yeah.
Absolutely. Like unpack that a little bit more, going back to those A players.
Yeah.
As a company, in order to scale, you're going to have to figure out how to move past, the mediocre people.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to bring those A players on. If you don't have a clear vision, you're not going to attract those types of people
No, they'll sniff it
because
out.
they want to know that all their time and energy is helping to achieve something. They have an internal guide that wants to create and build more. They may not be an entrepreneur, but you're trying to attract the entrepreneurs.
Ew, I love that.
They spend all their time and energy to make or to become great within the company environment.
Yeah.
And if your vision can't fit theirs inside it, you will not attract those people.
Yeah. And I loved how you said that. We got to coin that term as entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah,
Because
I didn't coin it. I've
yeah.
heard it around.
Okay, good. I
Entrepreneur.
like it because it's true. Because if I'm selling that vision, I got to say, hey, JD, I want you. I started this company. I need you to come help me build it from 0 to 5 million in 18 months. Will you do that? JD's going to say, well, how much you going to pay me? Because he's an entrepreneur. He needs that daily. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm like, hey, we'll figure it out as we go, But he's
Mm,
like, well, I want to build it with you, but what is it? So at the end of the day, you're going to say, here's my vision, here's what I can give you for that exchange. And in that process, as we build, you'll grow with me.
right.
It could be,
Yeah.
and you got to know. Go ahead.
No, well, many times there is a financial component to it, like creating a SMART goal.
Correct.
You,
Yes.
you guys know specific, measurable, yada, yada, right? And I want to create this dollar amount by this time, but to really attract those A players, there's more than that. There's the values of like the person, what's important to them on a social level, like their faith, whatever it happens to be for them. And these A players need to be able to either align with that or find zero issue with it, one way or the other. But to take it one step further, having the clear visions and values a lot of times can reduce the nitpicking, as he says, when it comes to discipline and incentives. You don't want to have a giant rule book of like, oh, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You have clear visions and values. And then when somebody's doing something that's, against the rules, you're not having a conversation about, oh, you broke this rule. You're talking about an alignment with the visions and
That's it.
values, whether they fit the company culture and, they add or take away from the morale of the company.
Yeah, and I like what you just said, alignment. That's really what it is do they align? And then as a leader, it's having those conversations, and we call them value-based conversations, right? You're
Mm,
having that value base. Like once you get the system in, and then if you change the language, it's like, hey, let's put that in our weekly meeting, or hey, was that value driven? What do you
mm,
think? Was that the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish? So it's kind of like you said, it has to have purpose. There has to be value, vision, and purpose, right?
right,
So if I'm doing it, doesn't matter what we're doing as an organization, but if you buy into what I'm doing, you're going to work hard, right? As long as
right.
it's ethical, legal, and right, right? And those are the
Yeah,
core values. I had to catch your brainwave there. So it and that's the thing is that if you have to have those core values, and if you don't, you can only be a good robber or a good cop. You can't be one or the other.
right.
And so and it's the same thing in a business. And I've hired hundreds and hundreds of people, JD, and I've had people steal from me. And what I mean by that is I've had employees steal time, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so yeah, and that's where I was going with it is that
Clock
they
in,
yeah,
hide, clock
yeah.
out. Yeah,
Oh, we've had some that stole they were clocking each other in and they were going against the company values and you thought they were in line with the values. You entrusted them. You thought they were rock stars and then you find out that it's the worst it's the most heart aching thing as a founder. So it goes along with the values, right? Then you have to come in and
mm,
have that value alignment conversation
yep.
and to see when you, and this is something for founders if you're listening and a lot of them and you've probably seen this JD when you hired so many people.
Oh,
You're like,
yeah.
"Hey, you why would you know I helped you out and it's just a you just have to understand values are values. That's how you hire, fire and promote."
Right.
And
Yeah.
the conversation looks like this, "Hey, that doesn't align with our values. I have to let you go." And
Yeah.
it's really and it's sometimes it's hard for the founder because you trusted those people at the beginning, and so you have to really understand is continue to be value driven, align
Yeah.
your structure, make sure there's clarity of what seats are there, and it kind of
Uh-huh.
goes back to where we're at is the org
Yeah.
chart, setting goals, clear goals, right?
Yeah, like, goes back to like that vision and where we're going and the SMART goals, right? So setting the clear goals and starting with, the 10-year plan, working backwards. Go ahead and talk more about that because what we want the listeners to focus on is how to work backwards to get like what are you going to work on for the next 90 days? How do
Yeah.
you get
Well, here's what I'd say. In the next 90 days, in if we were doing a planning session with you, I would say, what's it look like in the next 90 days? What would be a perfect quarter? Because that's what a 90 days is. Like it's a one quarter, right? In the world of business, 4 quarters, 90 days. And I'd say, what does that look like for you? If we were to say, what does it do? And so they would have to list, we would list everything what a perfect quarter looks like. And so if I'm running a business that is people driven, maybe it's a sales organization. Well, I'll give you one we had. It was a real estate company, and they want to hit certain goals, and they have about 200 realtors. And so they would say, okay, in the next 90 days, we're going to do this. And they would list out 3 to 7 goals. And then they'd decide who would be the best to own every one of those. Because you can't, multiple people can't own one goal. It has to be evenly, hey, JD, you need to find some land to develop this project. Can you own that? You would own that. That would be a 90-day goal for you only. And then they would work backwards. So then JD would take that goal and he would milestone it. He would just break it out for the next 90 days and get it done. And the beauty about it is every week when he comes in with his team, they'd say, "Hey JD, is that on track or off track?" And he'd say, "No, it's on track. I got it down. We're rolling."
there?
And they would move on so we don't get in the weeds because JD has given his word he was going to own it. and he can delegate the heck out of it, if that makes sense, but he has to own that goal. So that's what it means to work backwards, because you got to figure out what does that quarter look like, and then milestone and work backwards to get it done. And then
Right.
you have to project it
By
out.
focusing on like the meat and potatoes,
Yes,
we want to focus on what are those goals in the next 90 days that will truly
that's
move the
it.
needle.
Yeah,
If you can't look at it and justify that it will move the needle of the
don't do
business,
it.
don't do it.
Move it off to the next couple 90 days, or maybe that's a year out. Because a lot of times we get in the weed. If it's not going to move the needles in the next 90 to get you to your year, because you have to work backwards. Here, I think this answers your question more. When I come in to do the strategic planning, I'm going to do your 3 year first. I'm going to say, hey, what's your, well, actually, we start with the 5. I apologize. We start with the big, hairy, audacious goal from Jim Collins, Good to Great. And we say, hey, what does it look like 5 years from now when you grow up? And JD says, I want to have 5 locations and I want to be doing 16 million a year in revenue. Okay, that's a big, hairy, audacious. Because maybe at that time when he said that, he's only making 3 million in revenue, but he wants to increase in 5 years. He wants to triple or double it. And so he has this plan, and it's called a big, hairy, audacious goal because it stretches you. You have to go for it. You have to reach it. Yeah, BHAG. And so that BHAG is set. Then from the BHAG, we take you to your 3 year and say, okay, how do we line with that BHAG in the 3 year? And then we set what that would look like in a 3 year, but we start with revenue markers. Well, if he wants to hit 16, what do we have to hit here? And then what are your measurables? Because if you don't track it, you can't make it. Like you have to. So if I'm selling, if JD's real estate, I'm just using that as because he was in real estate a long time ago. So I'm just saying he wants to hit so and so, then he knows I got to have X amount of realtors. I got to close this many deals. So we know in 3 years he has to close 35 deals at a certain revenue marker. So that's a measurable. I can track that. It's a smart. Then in that same process, I'm going to say, okay, give me 3 to 5 things we need to do as an organization to get there. This is 3 years out. Then we're going to list those. Boom, 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 boom. But we're going to make sure they're smart. Smart, smart means specific, measurable, reachable, and attainable, and timing. You have to really think on those few things there, because if it's not specific, because JD, you've seen goals where they're so broad. Like you said it. Have you been in sessions like that with us, that the client will set a broad goal because they're so scared to hit this level? I'm like, yeah, that we call that, hey, let's make it so big that we won't lose, right?
Right.
But we work with you and your team to get it down to a SMART goal.
Right.
And if you're a founder, you want that. You want your teammates to be very specific. Hey, we're going to hit this in 3 years, and we're going to hit this in 3 years. And so then from that 3 year, we move it to your 1 year. So that's how we develop your 1 year. And you kind of see where this is going. This is what JD's question was, is now we're working backwards to our quarterly. So our 3 year develops our 1 year, our 1 year develops our quarterly plan. And once we set that in, we don't change this cycle until the year, we call it our yearly meeting with you, which is a 2-day offsite. And so then we'll come back and say, hey, how did we do for this year? And then we go in and adjust things, and then we reset our 1 year and we move things around. But that's how you work backwards, JD. You want to start with the BHAG. What is it that we're doing? And then we do some other things.
That leads perfectly into, the next component. Once you've got these tasks, these 90-day or like quarterly goals, like we need to track this.
Yeah.
How can you create KPIs or key performance indicators so that you're able to create like a scorecard? How do you know you're winning the day or the week or the month or the quarter?
Yeah.
So, implementing a tracking system. Go ahead and talk about that.
Well, it's changed. When we first started 10 something years ago, when we started this system, the tracking was on spreadsheets and it was frustrating. And so then finally
Which
in
is
that
okay.
process, yeah, it was okay. It worked because luckily my partner, which was my brother, which is our partner as well, Daniel, he's a spreadsheet guru, and so it worked at that time. Uh, but then we got a system at that time. It was called Traction Tool. Now it's called the Bloom system or the Bloom operating system,
Bloom
which
growth. Yeah.
is that's what we use. We put it in there. Even us as a company, we put all these things in there, and the system tracks it. It tracks our meetings, keeps us organized in our meetings and our agendas. The meetings that you work with, and as you're finishing things, it actually will go towards your business plan because your business plan's in the software as well. So everything
Right.
you set that we just went through, it's all trackable. Now we're not software salesmen, but this was a game changer for us when we finally switched and went on to this system, and we could have our meetings. So JD, if we'll have to do that next podcast. We'll have to show that.
Yeah.
But it's really cool because then I see everything. For me as a founder, I could get on there and see all my company holding their meetings,
Right.
which was cool. Visually, I'm like, oh, cool. Everybody's pulsing. I can see the meetings. I can see what you're working on, JD. If you're in a department I want to track, I can see if you're pulsing. Now, within that, this answers that next question. In the same system, you can track your KPIs weekly, monthly, quarterly. And what a KPI is, and I think this has been an interesting thing for me, JD, is a lot of companies don't know how to track their KPIs. They don't
Yeah.
even know what a KPI is. And I'm
Right.
telling you, and I have a lot of C-suite level people that don't know how to read a P&L. And it's not to be mean, it's just that they get promoted so quickly. They're like, "Hey, I need you.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
promoted." And
Yes.
they're
You're good
they're
at
like,
what you're doing right now. Let's move you up where you don't know what you're doing.
and hopefully you'll figure it out. Yeah. Yeah, good luck. And that's okay. That's how sometimes it works. But what I really encourage you owners, you operators, if you're running a company that's 2 million or more and you have 10 or more employees, you need an operating system like what we're talking about. And it sounds so simple because it is. But having a coach coming in and helping you with your team health and kind of lining this in. But going back to the KPIs where I'm heading is to have a coach sit there and really help you dial in your KPIs. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Because yeah, go ahead.
I tend to find that companies go overboard with the
Mm,
KPIs, right? Once they feel,
yeah,
oh, it's important. I need to be tracking my KPIs. Next thing you know, they got like 50 KPIs, like 50 metrics they're trying to measure, and
three.
just overwhelm. How can you boil it down
Yeah.
to, you know,
it-
again, the meat and potatoes?
Here's how it is. If I have weekly KPIs, I need to. The weekly KPIs are the indicators of the health of the company. So let me restate that again. If I'm coming into a meeting and I have my KPIs laid out, and a KPI would be something like this. If I was revenue for this week, let's say I'm a weekly salesperson, and I say I want to have 5 deals closed that week. When I come into that weekly meeting, I'm going to say I had 4. I didn't hit my indicator, but I had 4 out of the 5. And so I'm tracking that, and I'm going to then it's going to be in the red, right? Because I didn't hit my goal. So those indicators are 3 to 7 to 13 at the most. You can have up to, but I always say keep it like to 7. And if you're a bigger organization, don't go more than 13. Because if
Right.
you're a big organization, you might have a lot of things. But what those indicators need to be action driven, weekly driven. What are we trying to track to get a pulse on to help us to be healthy as an organization? But here's the key, JD. Those indicators, if we see a trend and it starts getting in the red and we're seeing red in the 5 weeks, or not even 5 weeks, in 3 weeks, if we're red, we should be addressing it before it becomes a big issue. And that's the
Right.
power of your KPIs.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not to say that there aren't additional KPIs within the department, but
You
when
can
it
have
comes
lots.
to the C-suite, we don't need overwhelm.
No.
We need, as he says, maybe
Health.
7 KPIs, that 7 metrics that indicate the health of the business. When it comes to revenue, um, that may be tied to sales, and sales might have, okay, we've got 200 sales staff. How many phone calls are they making per day? How many connections are they getting? How many conversations are they having? How many offers are they making? Right? How many deals are they closing? So within that component, they may have their KPIs that they're tracking, but it all leads to revenue,
That's it.
which is what the C-suite focuses on. They don't see the rest of it. The only time they're going to look at those other things is if they're seeing a consistent trend of not meeting their targets.
Yep. And I liked what you said. Don't overthink these KPIs. It's what trends you want to see as a C-suite team to make sure the company's healthy. So it's always that saying, if you're the founder and you're on vacation, you can look at your KPI chart. And if you're in the green, you're in the clear. If you're in the red, you better start.
Yeah. I forget who it was, but look at it as if you were sitting on a beach chair, drinking your margarita, and you were able to pull up your phone and look at a few numbers and go, my company's doing well.
Yeah, it's healthy.
That's what you really want, right? What is our current profit, right? The gross profit, like what is our revenue? These kinds of things that'll really tell you, are we healthy?
Yeah. If you're a shipping company, maybe you sell things. Did we get a lot of returns this week? You want to track that matrix. Like, hey, we got 25 returns, or we got 25 chargebacks if you're a big ticket item. You just need to decide, like, how many cars did we sell this week? If I'm a car salesman and I'm a dealer and I'm a Jeep, so that 3 to 7 KPIs, those indicators are so crucial. And you can do that weekly. You can do that bi-weekly, monthly. It just depends on the team, what you're doing. It has to fit your industry. So if your industry's very front end heavy, you want to track that weekly. So then when you come into that 90-minute meeting, you guys are pulsing. There's that word again, pulsing. Yeah. And it's the heartbeat.
Before we wind up with a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, no, we're up. Right? We're good. We're right at the hour mark where I thought we'd be. Yeah.
So how about we share a success story? Is there anything off the top of your head, like a business that we've worked with that used this system and saw spectacular results?
Yeah, I have several. The cool thing about it being a Bloom coach, which what we are, when we meet with coaches every quarter, we go and meet and learn new tools. It's fun to hear all the stories of all the clients using this, from like food chains. One of the coaches has Jimmy John's. He's their coach. One of the franchisees use him, and he has several stores he works with. Mine, it was fun with one of my clients. Our clients, JD, is we were helping them. We helped her reorganize her C-suite. She had to kind of make some adjustments, some moves, and that was a year ago. So we've been working with her about a year, and I just did their quarterly, and we're going to do their yearly this December. And just to see her excitement now, because when I first started working with her, she was, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then now here it is a year later, after we implemented everything we just talked about for the last hour. She's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm renewed and I'm excited. I'm building my team now, and I'm doing.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll keep it anonymous because we don't know if it's okay to talk about. But and also excited. The efficiency of the system, once it's in there, allowed her to go from just a few employees to now
she's growing
multiples of that. In a very short amount of time. It's been a spectacular change.
And and part of that too, and I'll tell you this part, she did the business plan. We went through everything like I explained, the 3-year, 1 year. And they're a nonprofit, so they they took that same plan and showed it to one of the top donors, and he matched. He says, "Oh, I've never seen this. This is so awesome." And I've been in a lot of nonprofits that overdo it. They hired these strategic planners for their board member meeting to do their yearly strategic plan, which is a waste of time and effort. So the one we do is more efficient, and it's going to get done because it's done at the C-suite level, not at the board level. Board members are volunteer positions, and so a lot of
Right.
times in nonprofits, you're trying to beg your board to actually participate, and it drives them crazy. So what we did is when she took it, she doubled her revenue by showing the plan. She's like, and then
Yeah.
she could go hire a new person that she was wanting.
So
Yeah, that's
what
crazy.
you're saying is that as far as a nonprofit and they're bringing in donations and things like
Yes,
this, by us bringing in the system, they used that as a marketing component and said
correct.
that we've got our stuff together. We have a system in place and a plan, and it creates more faith in the business. And therefore, she was able to get even more donations,
Raised money. Yeah.
driving revenue. Um, that's fantastic. So
Yep.
let's kind of
Right.
go through some key takeaways and wrap this up.
Okay.
Um, so I think by now you can see the importance of having an operating system in place to scale your business. And for the next 90 days, see if Matt, if you agree with these, establishing the meeting cadence, the pulsing, and not just having meetings every week, but structured meetings. We obviously have our system, and that's kind of one of the things that we coach our clients on is how to structure the meetings. But create your structured meeting and try not to get off on tangents by following that structure. Going through and doing an org chart, an organizational chart. So there's a hierarchy. This person's responsible for this. They're accountable for this. The buck stops with them on this. And who reports to who. So defining the visions and values so that there's a clear alignment for the team, the morale, attracting A players, and then setting the clear goals, building from the 5-year and coming on down to the 3-year, the 1 year, the 90 days, that then break up into the weekly tasks, implementing a tracking system to track the clear KPIs, what drives the needle. And then, I would say start with those 5 things.
Those are good.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think those are
Yeah.
good. And reach out to us. Reach out to me or JD. We'll help you through it. We'll help you. We're here to give you massive value. We're wanting to add to you. Regardless, if you bring us on, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to be your coach. If not, we're going to give you tons of values in this podcast as we do them every week. And you can just reach out and ask us any questions as well.
Right. I mean, something also want to clarify is that we follow the Bloom system. You can look it up. Matt's a certified coach in Bloom. But one key differentiator is we're entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We've run businesses, multiple businesses, and both of us have had exits, like profitable exits. So we've been there. It's not just that we're following a system. We've followed the system, used it, and seen it work.
Correct.
So if you focus on those 5 components just over the next 90 days,
Huge.
I mean, I don't know if it's legal to say, but I almost guarantee that you're going to see tremendous results in your
You can say that. Yeah. Guaranteed. Yeah. Those few tweaks. But yeah, give us some ideas. And if you do them, we'd like to hear back from you. This has been a good podcast, JD. We're up at the hour and it was perfect. Like,
Yeah. So, guys, if you're ready to transform your business,
yeah,
start by implementing these, 90-day priorities that we just went over. For more tools and guidance, check out our Bloom coaching program. You can visit us at what is it? excel.team/home, and that's xcel.team/home.
yep,
Check out our website. You can, reach out to us, and we'd love to talk to you. So
yeah,
if there's anything else,
yeah.
no, all right.
No,
We
that's it,
sign
man.
off. Thanks
Good.
for tuning in.
We'll see you
Until
next
next
time.
time.
Yeah. Take care,
All
guys.
right. Bye bye.